sold 3 times before 16 for liquor and coins. A cowboy made the 4th time forever and gave her roots. The deed to the Harlow parcel was still warm from my coat pocket when Denton Marsh rode up to the fence line with a girl in tow. I didn't look up right away. I was reading that deed for the 4th time since morning, not because I doubted the words, just because holding paper that says the land is yours takes some getting used to after 40-some years of working other men's ground. 411 acres. The creek that ran the south pasture. The ridgeline where the pines grew so thick you could lose a horse in there and not find it till spring. Mine. My name on it, Callum Reed, written in the county clerk's hand, and I kept waiting for some feeling to arrive that matched the size of the thing. It never quite did. Mostly I just felt the weight of the paper. That's when I heard the hooves. Denton Marsh was a man I'd known since my freighting days, not a friend, but the kind of man you know in a territory the way you know a certain rock in a road. You learn to go around him. He ran a trading post and a line of credit that spread through 3 counties like a slow rot, and he had a way of being cheerful about transactions that made you want to count your fingers after shaking his hand. The girl was on a sorrel mare I didn't recognize. She rode straight-backed, which I remember noticing, not like someone who was comfortable riding, but like someone who had decided a long time ago not to let anything show in her posture. She was maybe 19, maybe 20, dark-haired. Her coat was too light for the weather we'd been having, and I could see from 50 yards that she knew it was too light but wasn't going to say so. Denton pulled up at my gate and touched his hat. "Reed, heard you closed on the Harlow place." "Yesterday," I said. He smiled the smile he had. Man needs a cook. Man needs someone to run the house when he's on the range. I looked at the girl. She was looking at a point somewhere past my left shoulder, which I would come to learn was something she did when she was deciding whether a situation was going to require her to run or merely to endure. "This is Nora," Denton said. "I acquired her contract from the Pelham family over in Cutter's Creek. Good worker. Knows her way around a kitchen. She's paid off about half her debt to me, you take on the balance, and she works it off for you, say 18 months, and you get yourself a cook and a housekeeper, and she gets a clean ledger." There it was, laid out in Denton Marsh's cheerful accounting voice, the same voice he'd used to sell you 3 pounds of flour. A human being with a balance written next to her name. I had heard of this before, knew it happened. Had not expected it to show up at my gate on the 2nd day. I owned a piece of ground. I looked at the girl again. She still wasn't looking at me. The wind came off the ridge and moved her hair, and she didn't reach up to push it back. "How many times has this happened to her?" I said, not to Denton, I said it to her. She looked at me then, quick like something startled, then she looked at Marsh. "That's not really the..." Denton started. "I'm asking her," I said. A long quiet. The mare shifted her weight. Nora looked at me for a moment the way you look at a door to see if it'll hold before you lean on it. "3, she said. Her voice was flat and careful. "Before you." I stood there with that deed still in my coat pocket, and I thought about my name written in the county clerk's hand, and I thought about what it meant that a piece of ground could belong to a man but a person, a living woman with a straight back and eyes that had learned not to show anything, that she could be passed like a parcel. "How old were you the first time?" I said. She didn't answer that one. I looked at Marsh. "I'll take her on," I said, "but not under your terms." He frowned. "Reed. Write down what she owes you. I'll pay it today. Cash. And then she doesn't owe anybody anything, including me. She works here because she wants to, or she doesn't work here at all." The frown deepened. He was running numbers. "That's not how the arrangement..." "I know how the arrangement works," I said. "I'm telling you how this one is going to work." He thought about it. He did want the cash. That was the thing about Denton Marsh. Underneath all the arrangements, he just wanted the money. He told me a figure. I thought it was probably inflated by 30%, and I paid it anyway because I didn't want to spend another minute talking to him. He rode off. The girl sat on the sorrel mare at my gate and watched him go, and when his dust settled, she turned and looked at me. "I'm not going to run away," she said, like she was answering a question I hadn't asked yet, like she'd been asked to promise things before and wanted to get ahead of it. "I didn't figure you were," I said. "Come inside." "I'll get a fire going. You look cold." She was cold. That coat of hers was a summer coat, good for nothing once October got serious about itself, and October that year was very serious. I put her in the east bedroom and built up the fire in the main room and didn't ask her any questions that night. I made coffee and put it on the table and said she could have whatever she found in the kitchen, and then I went out to check on the horses. I stayed out there longer than I needed to, just to give her the house. Let her stand in the rooms and feel them without me watching. When I came back, she was sitting at the table with the coffee, and she had found the end of a loaf of bread, and was eating it like she hadn't eaten since morning, which she probably hadn't. She stopped when I came in, started to put the bread down. "Eat," I said. She did. I sat across from her and drank my coffee and didn't say anything for a while, and neither did she. And the fire popped, and the wind was getting up outside. "You don't have to be indebted to me," I said eventually. "What I paid Marsh, that's gone. I'm not carrying it on a ledger anywhere. You want to work here, there's work. I'll pay you the same wage I'd pay any hand who could cook and manage a house. You want to leave, you leave. I'll not stop you." She looked at her bread. "Why?" she said. Not like a question exactly, more like the word itself had come out before she decided whether to say it. "Because I own 411 acres of ground that's mine," I said, "and I'll be damned if the second thing I do with it is trade in a person." She thought about that for a while. "They all said something kind at the start," she told the table. "I expect they did," I said. She looked up then, looked at me the way she'd looked at me when I first asked her the question, like she was checking whether the door would hold. "I'll stay until I decide to go," she said. "I won't make you any promises past that." "That's all I'm asking," I said. And that was how Nora Vass came to the Harlow place. That was how it started. I need to tell you something about that winter before I tell you the rest, because the rest doesn't make sense without it. I had been alone a long time. Not lonely in the way that wears a man down, more like the kind of alone that becomes the weather you live in until you stop noticing it. I'd had a wife years back, before the freighting work and the drifting north and the string of jobs on ranches that belonged to other men. Her name was Clara, and she died of fever in the second year of our marriage, and I buried her in a churchyard in a town I have not been back to since. After that, I worked. That was mainly what I did. I was good at working. What I mean to say is that I did not bring Nora onto my land because I was lonely and wanted company. I brought her because what Denton Marsh was doing was wrong, and I had the money in my pocket and the ground under my feet, and there was no reason on earth not to stop it. That's all it was at the start. She was not easy those first weeks. I don't mean difficult, she wasn't. She worked hard, harder than I needed her to, in the anxious way of someone who has learned that her presence is only tolerated when it's useful. She kept out of my way. When I came in for a meal, she had it ready, but she'd eat standing at the counter sometimes instead of sitting, until I pointed to the chair across from me and said, "Sit down." She looked surprised every time. Like the invitation was something that required confirmation. There were things I noticed but didn't say anything about. The way she sat with her back to the wall whenever she could. The way she cataloged the exits of a room, I watched her eyes do it, a quick sweep, and she didn't know I could read it. The way she startled at a raised voice from outside. Nothing to do with her, just a ranch hand calling to another across the yard, and then controlled it so fast you'd miss it if you weren't watching. I wasn't watching in any calculating way. I just paid attention. That's something about working alone all those years. You get good at reading what's in front of you because there's nobody else to tell you what to think about it. I built her a better coat. That's the first thing I did. I went to Morrow's Dry Goods in Hatcher and bought the wool and brought it back, and she looked at the folded cloth on the table, and her face did something brief and unguarded before she gathered it back up. "I'll pay for it," she said. "Nora," I said. "It's cold." She made the coat herself, which I hadn't expected, made it well, with good stitching, and wore it from then on, and every time I saw her in it, I felt something that I didn't put a name to for a long time. The trouble with Holly's Crane started in November. Crane ran a cattle operation 4 miles north, bigger than mine, older money, the kind of man who had been first here and never forgot it and never let you forget it either. He'd had his eye on the Harlow parcel for years, wanted the creek mainly for his south herd. When I closed on it instead, he took it as a personal slight, which told you something about him. He showed up at my gate 3 weeks after Nora arrived. Came with 2 of his men and sat his horse, and looked at my place like he was appraising it for an estate sale. Nora was in the yard splitting kindling. She had gotten herself into a routine with it and was working steadily, not paying attention to Crane until he said her name. She went still, not frightened from where I stood, just still in the way of someone who is deciding. "I knew your last employer," Crane said to her. His voice was pleasant in the way of a man who knows he has the weight. "Gerald Pelham, he spoke of you." She went back to the kindling. Crane looked at me. "She works out." "Yes," I said. "I could use a woman who works. Add her to my offer on the creek land, give you a fair price for both." I want to be exact about what happened in me when he said that, because I've thought about it since. It wasn't anger, not right away. It was something that came up from deeper than anger, something that said no with the whole weight of every hour I'd spent building toward this piece of ground, this one thing that was mine, and now standing on it with my name on the deed, and a man trying to make a trade of the woman who lived on it. "She's not part of any offer," I said. "She's employed here, she's a free woman." "Reed, you want to talk about the creek, come back tomorrow without your men and I'll hear you. Today I'm done talking." He looked at Nora one more time. She was splitting kindling again, clean even strokes back to him. He left. That night she came and stood in the kitchen doorway while I was checking the accounts. I looked up. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to thank me for that." "I know," she said. "I'm doing it anyway." She went back to her room, and I sat at the table and looked at the lamp for a while. Here is what I didn't understand then, what it took me most of that winter to figure out. She had been given to men her whole life, passed like something with a price on it from the time she was barely old enough to work. And somewhere in all of that she had built herself a kind of armor that looked, from the outside, like stillness. She didn't expect kindness. She was suspicious of it the way you're suspicious of ice you can't see the thickness of. Every decent thing I did landed with the wrong weight on her for a while because she was waiting for what would be owed afterward. I didn't push on it. I just kept doing what I was doing. Paid her wages on time every week in her hand. Left her room alone. Told her when I was going to be out on the range and what I'd need done and treated the answer like it was a negotiation, not a command. She thought I was strange for a while. I know because I saw her watching me the way a person watches something they can't quite account for. December came down hard. 3 weeks of cold that killed 2 of my heifers and buckled a section of fence along the north pasture and kept us both inside more than either of us was used to. We got better at talking. Not about anything that mattered yet, cattle and weather and what needed doing in spring, but the kind of talk that maps the edges of a person. I learned that she'd grown up in Missouri, that her mother had died when she was 7, that her father had made the first transaction when she was barely 16, trading her to a man who owed him for the wiping of the debt. She told me this matter-of-factly, watching my face, and I kept my face still because I didn't want her to stop talking. "You're angry," she said. "At him," I said, "not at you." She turned her cup in her hands. "Most men hear that story and they feel sorry for me." "I feel sorry for the girl you were," I said. "I don't feel sorry for you, there's a difference." She looked at me. "What's the difference?" she said. "That girl didn't have any choices," I said. "You've got choices now, that's a different situation." Something moved across her face. She didn't say anything. She got up and went to the window and looked out at the snow coming down in the lamplight, and I left her to it. The second trouble was in January, and it was worse. A man named Ruck Pelham, the son of Gerald Pelham, who had sold Nora's contract to Denton Marsh, came to Hatcher looking for her. Apparently Gerald had died in the fall, and Ruck had decided that with his father's debts to settle he was owed something. And what he was owed, in his accounting, was either money or the girl back. I found out about it from Walt Scully at the livery, who told me a man had been in town asking about the Harlow place and the woman out there. I came home and told Nora straight. No soft leading up to it. She was entitled to know. She stood at the kitchen counter, and I watched her face do the calculation I had seen it do before, the quick reading of the room, the counting of exits, the decision about what the next hours were going to require of her. "I'll go," she said. "Go where?" "Before he gets here, so there's no trouble on your land." "Nora," I said, "this is your land too." She looked at me. "It's not my land." "You live here, you work here. I said so when you came. You want to leave, you leave. You want to stay, you stay. Nobody runs you off. Not Ruck Pelham, not anyone." "He'll make trouble." "He's welcome to try," I said, and I meant it in the specific, physical way, not as a figure of speech. I had run a freight line through rough country for 20 years. I had dealt with trouble before. She looked at me for a long time, trying to read me again, checking the ice. "Why does it matter to you?" she said. "Because you're a person," I said, "and this is my land. Both of those things are true, and neither of them is going to change because Ruck Pelham had a bad winter." She sat down slowly in the chair. She looked at her hands on the table. "Nobody ever said that to me before," she said, voice flat and careful, the way it always was when something was moving underneath it. "Said what?" "That I'm a person." A pause. "I know I am, She stopped, started again. "Nobody ever said it like it settled something." I sat down across from her. The lamp was going. The snow was coming again outside. "It does settle something," I said, "as far as I'm concerned." She didn't say anything for a while. Then, "What if he comes with men?" "Then I deal with men," I said. "You let me worry about that part." Ruck Pelham came on a Thursday, which I remember because I had been mending the east fence, and I still had the wire tool in my belt. He came with one man, a hired hand who had the look of someone who didn't especially want to be there. Pelham himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with the red face of a man who drank more than he ate, and the entitled set to his jaw that you see in sons of men who had money once. He said his piece at my gate, said his father's debt, said the girl's name, said what he figured was owed. I said no. He said it differently, louder. His hand went to his coat in a way that was meant to tell me something. I told him that Nora Vass was a free woman employed on my land, that no debt from any prior arrangement had any standing with me, that if he came back he'd be trespassing, and that if he reached any further into that coat, he was going to have a problem that was considerably worse than whatever debt he thought he was owed. We looked at each other. His hired man was already backing his horse. Pelham went. He went cursing, turning in his saddle, saying things about what I didn't understand and what he'd see about and what this wasn't finished, but he went. Men like that, underneath the volume, are mostly counting. What he counted that day was me standing at my gate with a wire tool and no particular expression, and whatever he counted told him to go. Nora had watched from the window. I knew she had. When I came inside, she was standing in the kitchen with a pan she'd forgotten she was holding, and she put it down when she saw my face. "He's gone," she said. "He's gone," I said. She let out a breath, one breath. Then she did something I hadn't seen her do. She sat down in the chair and put her face in her hands and stayed there for a moment, just one moment, and I stood in the doorway and didn't move and didn't speak. Then she lifted her head, and her face was composed again, the armor back in place. "Thank you," she said. "You keep thanking me," I said. "You keep doing things," she said. Spring came late that year and broke all at once the way it sometimes does, 1 week of mud and then green, almost overnight, the kind of green that hits you like something you forgot was possible. I had a lot of work. She had a lot of work. We fell into the rhythm of it together, and somewhere in there I stopped thinking of it as the rhythm of a hired arrangement and started thinking of it as just how the days went. She had started to change, not in any way I could point to in a single moment, more the way ice goes when the weather turns, gradually and then all at once. She sat at the table with me at meals now, not against the wall. She argued with me about where to plant the kitchen garden, and she was right about where to plant the kitchen garden. And I told her she was right, and she looked surprised and then laughed, a short, honest laugh, and I felt something shift all the way through me when she laughed. She had opinions. I hadn't quite known that yet, or I'd seen the edge of it, but not the whole thing. About the fencing and about which of my horses had a bad left knee that I was ignoring, and about a stand of cottonwoods along the creek that she thought would be good for shade in summer. She told me these things now with more directness, less waiting to see if it would land wrong, and every time she did it I felt, I don't know exactly. Pleased isn't quite the word. Something more like, this is right. This is what this place was supposed to be. One evening in May, she was mending a piece of tack at the table, and I was reading, and she said without looking up, "Do you ever think about going anywhere else?" "No," I said. "You were a freighter, you traveled." "I did," I said. "I'm done with traveling." She was quiet for a minute, working the awl through the leather. "I used to think about it constantly," she said. "Going somewhere nobody knew me, starting over somewhere clean. And now..." She put the tack down, looked at the table for a moment. "Now I think about the cottonwoods," she said. Whether they'll give good shade, whether the garden's going to come in. A pause. Whether the knee on that roan is actually getting better or I'm just wanting it to. I set the book down. It's not getting better, I said. You were right about the knee. She smiled. She smiled at the table, not at me, and it was better than if she'd smiled at me because it was completely unguarded. Just the smile of someone who is warm and has enough to eat, and for this one moment does not need to be watching the door. I want to plant another kitchen garden, she said. Bigger, I want herbs along the south fence. All right, I said. And I want to fix the window in my room. The north wind gets in. I'll fix it this week. She looked up then, looked at me the way she'd looked at me that first day at the gate, but different. Not checking whether the door would hold, checking something else, something that had a different answer now. I'd like to stay, she said. If that's still. It's still, I said. We looked at each other across the lamp. You gave me something, she said. I don't know how to, she stopped, shook her head. When you paid Marsh, you said it was because you wouldn't start your place by trading in a person, but that's not all you did. What did I do? She thought about how to say it. Every time a man bought my contract, I had a price on me, a number. Even when they were decent men, there was always the number, what I owed, how much I was worth, and to whom. She was talking carefully, the way she talked about things that had lived in her a long time. You paid it, and then you said it was gone, but then every week you paid me wages, and you asked me things instead of telling me. And you stood at that gate and told Ruck Pelham I was a free woman. She stopped. You kept saying it until I started to believe it, she said. The lamp, the window with the night behind it. I had nothing equal to what she'd just said, and I knew it, so I didn't reach for something equal. I just let it stand. I meant it every time, I said. I know, she said. That's what I'm telling you, that's the thing. We were married in July at the county seat, in a room with a flag and a tired judge who did 4 ceremonies before noon and didn't slow down for hours. Nora wore her good dress and her coat, the one she'd made herself from the wool I bought, because the morning was cold the way high summer mornings sometimes are before the day gets going. She held my arm going up the courthouse steps, and I felt the grip of her hand, and I thought, this is it. This is what the deed was for, not the 411 acres. This. Afterward, we ate at a place on the main street, and she had pie, and we talked about the roan's knee and the south fence, and what we were going to do with the north pasture in the fall. The ordinary talk of 2 people who share a piece of ground, and it was the best conversation I have ever had. We drove back in the afternoon, and she fell asleep against my shoulder on the wagon bench, the way a person sleeps who is not listening for footsteps, who has decided the place is safe. I drove with one hand and let her sleep, and the road ran through the grass toward the ridge where the pines were thick and green, and the creek flashed when the sun hit it just right. She woke up when we turned in at the gate, and she straightened and looked at the place, the house with the fixed north window, the kitchen garden with the herbs along the south fence, the good horses in the pasture, and she put her hand on my arm. Not to hold on, not to check anything, just because it was there, because I was there, and because this was hers. Home, she said. One word, not even looking at me when she said it, just looking at the place. I drove through the gate and let it stand. That word and that land and her hand on my arm, the weight of it, and the whole October to July of it. That's what I've got all these years on. The deed is in the box by the bed, my name and now her name. The cottonwoods along the creek grew tall and give good shade. The roan's knee never did get right, and she was right about that too. Some mornings I stand at the pasture fence before she's up, and I look at this ground, the green of it, the line of the ridge, the particular blue the sky goes in the early hour. And I think about Denton Marsh riding up with that girl and how close it came to going some other way. If I hadn't had the money that day, if I'd let his terms stand, if I'd been a different kind of man than I was. I wasn't, is all. I was the kind who'd spent 40 years working other men's ground waiting for my own peace. And when I finally had it, I knew what it meant to own something, and I knew what it meant to be owned. And I was not going to be the one who blurred the line between those two things. She comes out eventually when the morning's far enough along, and she stands beside me at the fence. Doesn't say much. Neither do I. We watch the horses the way people who have earned their quiet watch things, all the way down to the bottom of it, nothing held back, no listening for the door. She sold 3 times before she was 16, and not one of those men gave her a thing that was truly hers. I gave her this: 411 acres, the creek, the ridge, the cottonwoods, a fixed window, wages in her hand. Her name on the deed. I gave her ground to stand on. That's all I did, that's the whole of it. And she stood on it.